Okay, so for number 2, we're given the graph of f of x here. And it's really important to recognize a couple characteristics that are going to impact the questions that we work to answer. There is a vertical asymptote at x equals 5, as well as a horizontal asymptote at x equals -2. And we're going to see how that impacts our evaluation of some of these limits as we work through this. So part A is asking for the limit as x approaches 3 of f of x. So notice that doesn't say from the left or from the right, so we have to consider both. So we're going to go ahead and identify where x equals 3 is on our graph. Okay, so it looks like it's right here. And we want to think, or we want to look for on our graph, what is the behavior as we approach x from the left and from the right. So again, we need to trace that out on our graph. So from the left hand side of 3 and from the right hand side of 3, we can see that we are approaching a value of 3. So the number 3 is showing up a lot here in this problem, but it's acting a bit different in different situations, right? We have the c value here, x approaches 3, and then we have the L value here, the value of our limit, which is the y value of 3. All right, B, we are asked for the limit as x approaches -5 of f of x. And again, we are not asked for the left or for the right, so we need to do both. So we'll go ahead and identify where -5 is on our graph. So it looks like it's over here at our, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. -5 is right here at our vertical asymptote. So we need to look from the left-hand side and the right-hand side along our graph to determine what the behavior of our function is. So if we trace our function as it comes to x equals -5 from the left, we see that it's trending off towards -infinity. And if we trace from the right, we see that it's trending up towards +infinity. And if you'll notice, those are not the same, right? So here we have a situation where the limit as x approaches -5 from the left of f of x does not equal the limit as x approaches -5 from the right of f of x. Again, because we're going in two different directions, +infinity and -infinity, we say that this limit does not exist. In C, you'll notice that we are asked for a one-sided limit. We're asked for the limit as x approaches -5 from the left of f of x. So again, we pick out where x is -5, and then we're looking, what is our function doing as we're approaching -5 from the left? So we'll trace out on our function as it approaches -5 from the left-hand side, and we see that that trend of the behavior is going to -infinity. And in D, it shouldn't hopefully come as too much of a surprise, but we're going to look at the limit as x approaches -5 from the right. See what the value, or sorry, what the behavior of our function is there. So we'll again find -5. And we want to look at what's happening as we approach from the right-hand side on our graph. So we trace our function as it approaches x equals -5 from the right, and we see that it trends up to +infinity. So what we can say is that the limit as x approaches -5 from the right of f of x is +infinity. And what we've just kind of broken down here in parts C and D is that claim, or that fact that I stated earlier here, right? We saw that the limit as x approached -5 from the left, which is a -infinity, did not equal the limit as x approaches -5 from the right, which was +infinity, and that resulted in our answer for B, right? Those two facts told us that this limit as x approaches -5 does not exist, because the left-hand limit and the right-hand limit are not equal. And you can see a little blurb about that vertical asymptote and how that's impacting some things. All right, so part E is asking for us to actually evaluate f of -1. Okay, so f of -1, we need to let x equal -1 and figure out what then is f of x. So what's the value of our function, not the behavior, but the value of our function at x equals -1. So we'll identify x equals -1 and we'll need to read up to our graph. And it looks like that is a value of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So when x equals -1, our function is equal to 6. Okay. In part F, we are asked for the limit as x approaches -1 of f of x. Notice it's not from the left or from the right, so we need to do both. So we'll go up to our graph and find x is a -1, still highlighted from the last problem, right here. And we need to see what is our graph doing as we approach from the left and from the right. So we'll trace that out on our function. We'll see that as x approaches -1 from the left, we are approaching that value of 6. And as x approaches -1 from the right, we are again approaching that value of 6. Okay, so that allows us to make the statement that the limit as x approaches the limit as x approaches -1 of f of x is 6. All right, last couple here. Here we have some notation that we may have seen earlier in the year, but it it's probably been a while. We probably saw this when we were dealing with rational functions. Here we're looking at the limit as x goes to infinity of our function. So essentially, we're looking at as x gets large in the positive direction. What is our graph doing? Okay, so let's go ahead and check that out. If I read out on my x-axis, I can see that as my x values get larger and larger, right, as they get more and more positive, my function is actually being held by this horizontal asymptote, right? If I continue this trend, if the trend continues, we can see because of this horizontal asymptote that we aren't going to get below that value of -2. So here we can make the claim that the limit as x approaches infinity of f of x is -2. Okay, so that's our horizontal asymptote in the positive direction. Oops. Okay, and it looks like in the last part of this question, we are asked for the limit as x approaches -infinity. What's the function doing? So as our function's going out to -infinity, I can see that it's actually being trapped below -2, but that's still telling me that as our x values get more and more negative, our function is approaching this value of -2. So to wrap up this example, we will say that the limit as x approaches -infinity of f of x is -2 as well. And again, there's some information here about that idea of the horizontal asymptote and how that's impacting things. Okay, so I'll post an answer key to these notes as well as these practice problems on Google Classroom. Something that I want you guys to see before I sign off is this down here. If you want some feedback on how you're doing with graphical limits, essentially this lesson, you're going to have an opportunity to take a practice work quiz this week. The schedule for that will be posted in our Week at a Glance in that Google Doc that I release to you guys every Monday morning. So go ahead and check that out, and please reach out if you have questions for me. Either send me an email or stop by office hours sometime this week.